Yes! Yeah. He just can't be human is one of the most horrific things I have ever read in a fantasy book. And a high in Hobbland is usually followed by a horrific plummet to the bottom of the depths of pain. So I can't wait to continue. Okay, I think I'm finally ready to read some more Farseer. The first book broke me, and I've heard The Royal Assassin is even worse. So, that being said, I cannot wait to read this. And so much so, I even came prepared this time. I came prepared. Trauma Club merch. In the Assassin's Apprentice video, I did say this. I've joined the Trauma Club. I hate it here. 5 stars. So now I have this. Hopefully it will help save me from how traumatic Royal Assassin is going to be, but we'll see. Much like the Assassin's Apprentice video, this will be a spoiler-filled video, so I will be talking about everything that happens in Royal Assassins. So if you have not yet read it, you might want to go away, read it, and then come back to this video. And let the fun begin. So I am only about 100 pages into Royal Assassin, and already so much has happened. Hobb is really known for being like a slow-paced writer, particularly with this sequel and book 3, which is even chunkier. But that's not to say that things don't happen. It's just there's a lot of side things going on. It's such a large scope story, and you really get a lot from the side characters and everything, that it just feels rather slow-paced. But I'm having a blast so far. Having Fitz very angry and hurt from the events of Assassin's Apprentice is an interesting angle and way to start the story. I just assumed that it would kind of be full stopped and he would be healed, and then we would pick up a Royal Assassin and it's just him getting back in the story. But this sort of lingering illness and effect is an interesting take that I don't see very often in fantasy. Quite a lot you have the end of a big climactic part of the story, and then in book 2 it's 6 months later and they feel fine. So it's really cool to see this sort of different approach of having the effects really last with the character. And the first chapter was so cool, this weird blending of King Shrewd and Fitz's consciousness kind of blending together as Fitz is in this bed ill, and I assume he's using the skill to then connect with the king. Then we get to see some of what's going on in Buckkeep as well. I will say that I'm not a huge fan of blending the story so far into the narrative. Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter did it as well, and I'm just not a huge fan of trying to fit the recap into the story. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like having like a story so far section just feels a lot more fluid, and then you can get into this main story than trying to just fit it into the narrative. However, I will say that I think it is a good recap at the start of this, of the events of Assassin's Apprentice, and what I liked that Hobb did was she kind of included some new tidbits and updated information that kind of fills in the gap between books 1 and 2. But that was a really dark start to the story. I don't remember Assassin's Apprentice being as dark and brutal as watching the Red Ship Raiders first person attack this village and kind of maybe kill Molly. I'm guessing because we didn't see a dead body, she's not dead. If you don't see a dead body, the rule is they're not dead. But you never know with Hobb. You never know with Hobb. And the dynamic with Burek really changed at the start of this book. They were kind of more at odds at the end of Assassin's Apprentice. But there seems to be a lot of weight put into this earring that Patience gave Fitz, because Burek seems almost tied to it. I don't know if it's part of the magic system, because it seems more than just loyalty. Or maybe we will get like a story from Burek about him swearing an oath, and they used the earring as the sort of token gesture. I don't know, but I feel like there's more to it. It has to be tied to the magic. This switch in Burek just feels too, not drastic, because they were kind of getting closer towards the end of Assassin's Apprentice, but just there was enough of a shift that it didn't feel perfectly natural and non-magical. If that makes sense. I think there's something more with this earring. I also feel like the epigraphs are very different, particularly chapter 3. It almost reads Tolkien-esque. It's very gets into sort of the history of these mythical elderlings, and from these battered scrolls and this ancient history, and no one really knows what they look like. And this I'm here for, this lost lore and ancient gods, these elderlings, and obviously the whole series is called The Realm of the Elderlings, so I assume they will be playing a part eventually. But it's weird because you've not really seen much of them at all yet. But this epigraph, chapter 3, it feels very purposeful to add this in at the start of the story. So I think perhaps we will get some elderlings or reference to them in the rest of this book. That's what I'm hoping anyway. But I did love that passage. And then eventually Fitz does return to Buckkeep, and he's back, and it feels like not only Fitz is returning to Buckkeep, but the reader is returning to Buckkeep. There is something about just his character going back to a place right at the start of the book, and especially because it's a sequel, you're like, oh, I just feel like I'm getting back to Buckkeep, and I just loved it. It was a great way to bring us back into the story. However, all the small details that Hobb has included in the description work that makes it feel like, yes, it's Buckkeep, but no, it's not the same Buckkeep, and this is not the same Fitz. The way that he responded to the guards at the door, this sort of more noble way of talking and sort of not looking down, but sort of air of command, I like that. And also the small details of things like his clothes aren't fitting anymore. I mean, this is just perfect imagery and metaphor for he's grown to be a different character. But what's interesting is he's not too big for the clothes, but he's too small for a lot. There is this term that's mainly used in the gaming industry called environmental storytelling. And it's when you include parts of the environment in a certain way to imply a sort of undergoing narrative of the world. So old ruins in like a war-ravaged country would come under environmental storytelling. And I think it's really difficult to do in non-visual mediums such as books, because you've got to actually write down what you're seeing. But I think Hobb does it really well at the start of this. Seeing the Queen in Waiting, what's her name? Kitrikin? We're going to call her the Mountain Queen. The Mountain Queen, the fact that she has kind of spruced it up, and Fitz is going about saying how clean it is and how there's new decorations and how there's new plants and how things have just been look so much nicer now that she's there. I think that's such a good way to show this side plot thread with her and kind of what the dynamics have been like in the time since Fitz has been there. Instead of hopping to another point of view and seeing it from her perspective or even Verity's perspective, instead we can still see it through Fitz because it is a single POV story, but we now, just by these small little details, we can see that Ketrikin is quite a confident person, and she's clearly making her mark in Buckkeep. It's such a small detail, but it just adds so much to the story. And I think that's something that Hobb does really, really well, is she includes little details that just have so much in the way of implications. And of course, in classic Hobb fashion, it takes 60 pages for things to go absolutely terribly for Fitz. My poor Fitz, we've just started this chonker of a book and already things have gone so downhill. Hobb, come on. But it turns out that Molly is indeed alive and she is in Buckkeep. And the first interaction that Fitz and Molly have is him staggering up to his room with this illness that he's trying to hide, and Molly comes across him and thinks that he is drunk. Now, just for a little context, in case you've forgotten, in book 1, Molly's dad beat her and was a drunk, so she's very anti-alcohol. So he was in the worst state to have run into her, but not only that, when they started talking, Molly admits that yes, she went away, but she didn't go away with this other guy because they were going to be married, but that was her cousin. And she was looking to improve her situation so she could court Fitz. And Fitz did not handle it well. To be fair, he's very ill at this point of the story. And then Molly opened up about Patience telling her that Fitz had just abandoned her. This was Patience doing? That's not cool. And that scene ended with Molly slamming the door on Fitz, telling him that he's a drunk and she would never marry a drunk, despite the fact he's trying to hide this illness rather than actually being drunk. 60 pages in. Oh no. So then finally Fitz gets to talk with Patience and sort of say, "What you doing?" And it turns out that Patience was trying to protect Fitz because she's worried about all the people who would make Molly's life a misery because she's going out with him, and also all the danger that she would be put in by going out with Fitz, which makes sense, but man, they both have feelings for each other. Come on, Hobb. just give him one thing. Just give him a little shred of something. So then Patience all but bans Fitz from seeing Molly at all, at least until things have progressed and gotten better around Buckkeep, and also her position and his position. But Lady Patience keeping them apart, I just need Fitz and Molly to have a quiet conversation for Fitz to explain himself. Just let them have one quiet conversation. That's all they need to sort out that complete misunderstanding with being drunk and everything around that. It's just, you just need one conversation in a quiet room. But Patience like, no, you can't. I'm having a great time though. It's a great book, but already stressed out. It's already stressing me out here. Oh man. I'm gonna go read some more. I just put all my filming stuff away and read one more chapter, but I have things to talk about, so I got all back out again. The next chapter, Fitz goes down to the city and helps free a wolf. The wolf's called Cub. If she kills it, there will be riots. No! This wolf better get renamed Night Eyes. I swear, if she kills another one. Hobb. Night Eyes! Yes! Yes! No more death to animals. You have no idea the relief I felt when the name Night Eyes came up connected to Cub. I am so glad. I was very concerned that Cub was going to be another dead animal companion, and that would not have been good. What was this line? On page 127, Cub at this point said, "Female, nice, vast approval." When he smells Molly through Fitz's nose. Is Night Eyes like Fitz's wingman now? What was that? However, that end section was really concerning, with Fitz almost turning into a wolf. He went out hunting and he kind of lost control of himself in a way. So you're starting to see the repercussions to him leaning into the whip, which is really interesting. Because Burek wouldn't have warned him if it was all fine and jolly and fine. So clearly there's issues with using it and leaning into it. So I'll be interested to see where that goes, especially after that chapter where he does hunt with Night Eyes. That's concerning. And more of Ketrikin, the Mountain Princess. I love her. She's awesome. She's such a cool character. I don't really remember that much from Assassin's Apprentice, but she's become like one of the main characters in my eyes so far with this story, because she's such a cool character. That whole plot thread with her going out riding with Regal of all people, who I've not talked about in this video yet, but oh man, the frustration I feel for Regal and the fact that everybody's just like, we know he sucks, but we can't do anything about it, makes it even more frustrating. But anyway, he went out riding with the Mountain Princess, and then he went, oh, Bunny, I need to go chase this, right around where these forge attacks were happening. And Fitz came across her as she was being attacked by these forged people and had to fight them off. And then the whole plot line with her the next day, kind of rounding up everybody and getting them out and saying, we need to get these forged people and banish them, but they were once our people and we're going to do it respectfully. The way that she just took control of the situation, even Verity was like, she's awesome. I just wish that Verity would include her more in the Red Ship's Raiders stuff with the boats and the Outlanders, which I know I read the comments on the first Assassin's Apprentice video, and it should probably be Out Islanders, which makes way more sense. However, I now read it as Outlanders, and I can't get it out of my head. So I know that's probably wrong, but that's probably what I'm going to continue calling them. But I do think that Verity should include her more in the attacks and things, because clearly she has a mind for it, and clearly she has a mind for people, and she's such a strong character, and seeing her just kind of almost go frail as she's been left with sort of court politics and having to deal with all that instead of actually being involved in things that she likes. Especially with the Mountain Kingdom, their rulers were very much part of the people, and they had to do things with the people, which is the complete opposite of Buckkeep, where you have servants and maids and servers and all that sort of stuff. But it's cool to see that culture shift affecting her in a way as well. And there was a beautiful chapter with Lady Patience. She frustrated me a wee bit with forcing Fitz and Molly to stay apart. I can see why she did it. Still frustrated me. However, when she had sort of a heart-to-heart with Fitz and said, not completely outright, but she very much implied that she left her peaceful life to come and look after him, despite the fact that she is not his mother. Oh, it was such a wholesome moment in that chapter. It was so sweet. One thing that I love that Hobb does is every character is so well fleshed out. Even they don't need a lot of page time to be really fleshed out and interesting and completely unique. The Mountain Princess, Kitrikin, and Lady Patience, and Verity, although we're getting to see more and more of Verity, which is awesome. And even Burek, she does such a good job of making interesting side characters. They all feel so alive and like they could be the protagonist to side novels because they're so vital to the story and interesting as people and go through a really cool arc. I think one of the reasons why she can do this so well is that these stories take over a long period of time, whereas another type of novel is usually just within a shorter period of time. But because these can take over years and years, you can really see pieces of these side characters' lives, and you can fill in the blanks through contextual clues and seeing where they got to where they got and why, and kind of learn more about their morals and the choices that they have made. I mean, Kitrikin, for example, Kitrikin? There's no way it sounds like chicken. It has to be something else. The Mountain Princess, the fact that we've only had a handful of chapters where Fitz is kind of checked in with her, but seeing all these clues, like with the environmental storytelling that I was talking about when I first picked up the book, with sort of her confidence in changing the keep, and then we got to check in, she felt very down, and she didn't know how to deal with this culture shift of not being as hands-on as a ruler as she was when she was in the Mountain Kingdom. And then we get to see her dealing with the forest people and taking back that control. It's like she was only even in 2 of those scenes, but it creates such a vivid and interesting arc, and Hobb does this so well. In talking about side characters, specifically Molly, the whole scene with Verity accidentally dreaming the same dream as Fitz because he's kind of lost or doesn't have the power with the skill to kind of keep it within, and the fact that he was dreaming about Molly, that's so awkward. I felt so bad for Fitz, but it was very funny. But Molly and Fitz finally kind of getting together. So wholesome. So happy, finally. You know it's a concerning situation when things are looking up for Fitz. You're like, oh no. And the last chapter I read was kind of Verity starting to train Fitz and work with him with getting in his head and being able to watch through Fitz's eyes. And they're kind of working on how long that they can keep a connection through this skill. And finally, we have seen the Outlanders. This is the first time we've properly run into them. And we have boats going. We're fighting them. Fitz has fought them directly. We've seen them. This is really cool. So we're kind of thrown into this middle section of the book where we're finally fighting back, but it still doesn't seem to be doing that much. And to make things worse, Regal is telling his courtier, I don't know how to pronounce that word, his wizard people who can skill that the red ship raiders are coming, and telling them to not pass messages along. So we have seen some of the coastal duchies still be attacked because we're not getting the ships to them, all because of Regal. Hey, Regal! And this white ship is really interesting, a white ship that only Fitz saw. We don't really get much information about it. Everybody told him, like, you're going crazy, and he just didn't talk about it. So I'm interested to see if that's the boat that's tied to the forging. That would be my guess, is that all the people who are being forged, either their souls go into that boat afterwards, or that boat is tangible, and that's where they take them to forge them. That's kind of my thinking with the white ship. And then, because that isn't actually doing that much, Verity is now going to hunt down the Elderlings. Now, this was a surprise. It was all kind of going that way, even at the start. I think I made a note on how one of the epigraphs was about Elderlings, in the series realm of the Elderlings. They were always going to get involved, but I just assumed that Fitz would be going with him. So the fact that Fitz is still in Buckkeep is interesting, because that means we're not getting to see all what happens with the Elderling, which kind of has me worried that Verity might die, or something might happen to Verity that Fitz has to go to him. Because that's the only reasonable explanation that I could see why you would do it this way, because we're always in Fitz's head. And if something important happens, we kind of need to be there to see it. So now I'm worried about Verity. And in his absence, of course, Regal is being an absolute pain. It's really sad because Burek went with Verity as well, so Fitz is very much on his own. And Regal's starting to really take control. He's not letting Fitz outside of the keep. He's not passing on messages. So the coasts are being attacked by red ship raiders, and he's kind of sowing in this idea that Verity's on this fool's quest. Not the good type of fool either. One thing I did note down that I thought was quite cool, on page 386 of this edition, we have an epigraph from Shade, which is really cool because he went to the land of the Outistlanders, and he found out that escrawling is the word for forging for the Out Islanders. So it's quite cool that he went, so he clearly knows more about the Red Ship Raiders than most people do. So I'm wondering if we'll get more epigraphs from him to kind of fill in some of this background context with them, or if we will eventually get to travel there with Fitz. So I really like that the epigraphs are not just Fitz relaying his story, but is very much pieces of the narrative as well, which is really cool with the Elderling lore at the start. Now we have Shade perspective epigraphs. However, Burek does return and say that there's bad things going on, and he was under attack. And what's really cool about this section is we get a lot more about Burek and kind of his relationship with Patience, because we get to kind of find out that there's a bit of a backstory there where they were in love before Patience met Chivalry, and it makes this awkward but interesting dynamic between the characters, and it puts a lot of things into context with how Burek approaches relationships and just his way of life, because he's very much, I'm now the king's man, or king in waiting at that point, and I can no longer be with this woman. It's such a sad backstory, and I'm not surprised, as Hobb, it's going to be a sad backstory, but it's still, with some emotional scenes when he came back and he was injured, and Patience was calling him Burr, which was adorable. And things just kind of got worse from there. In chapter 23, everything felt like it was closing in. We had Serene in his room, which was dodgy. He's not allowed out the keep anymore. Said that Molly was hunted down by these people and threatened to stay away from Fitz. And then she eventually pulls away from Fitz because of all this and the fact that he can't tell her everything that's going on. Brutal. And then Verity was maybe dead. There was no way I was believing that even for a second. Just the way that information came, it was too placid and just kind of, yeah, he's dead, by the way. I was like, no, this is Regal. This is definitely Regal. And we found out it is Regal. And he now wants to send the king and the princess away to keep them safe and basically take control of the crown. Especially because Ketrican is now pregnant, which is another concern because that baby is just another person in the way for Regal to try and get to the throne. So I'm worried about her and keeping her safe. And finally, we get some context, more context with Burek, with Night Eyes and the Wit. He's called the Heart of the Pack, according to Night Eyes, who seems to just know him through his bond, which was really interesting to see, because I did say this in the Assassin's Apprentice video. He definitely has been bonded to animals in the past, and this confirms it, which is really interesting. We don't get a lot more context other than that. He did eventually sever that connection and become the Burek we know today, but we don't really know what the story is there completely. But this does confirm that he did use the Wit and bonded to animals. The fact that he even has a name from all the wolves, the Heart of the Pack. Another great use of the epigraphs is talking about the Pocked Man. Every time the Pocked Man comes up, you know things are going to go poorly, because in world, if you see signs of the Pocked Man, things will go poorly. So the fact that Hobb is writing the Pocked Man into epigraphs, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a bad chapter. Bad things are going to happen. And it's such a cool way to have this foreshadowing tied to the world building and having that in the epigraph. I thought that was really smart and really cool. And just in case you thought, oh, Regal might not be that bad, we found out probably the worst thing that I think he's ever done, or one of the most horrific. I read it and I was like, I cannot believe. Full stop. And that is that Regal has been taking King Shrewd's medicine away from him. And as we found out when Fitz skilled through King Shrewd, the medicine is very much to mollify the pain that is just becoming overwhelming for him and just keep it at bay. So the fact that he's taken that away and letting this pain slowly seep back into King Shrewd, this unimaginable pain, as Fitz described it, is one of the most horrific things I have ever read in a fantasy book. I mean, come on. That's awful. However, we were given a very nice section. I want to read this out loud. Night Eyes on page 545, comforting Fitz. I did not need to recount the last day's events to him. Did not have to find the words to describe how it felt to watch Molly walk away from me. Nor did he ask questions or make sympathetic talk. The human events would have made small sense to him. He acted on the strength of what I felt, not why. He simply came to me and sat beside me on the dirt floor. I love Night Eyes. Night Eyes is the best. Such a wholesome relationship between those two. But I had to read that out loud because I thought that's a great paragraph, just kind of perfectly explaining the dynamic between Night Eyes and Fitz, and it's exactly what Fitz needs. And then on the roller coaster of Hobb, we did get a high right at the end before I put the book down to do this catch-up, which is that Brondy, I think his name, he's one of the Coastal Dutch's leaders, and he said, do you want to take Buckkeep? The Coastal Dutches will back you, which I think is really cool. And Fitz is like, I mean, could. And the whole idea is that he is going to hold it until Verity comes back. But I would much prefer Fitz to be in command than have no one in command of Buckkeep. Because I never even thought about it. But if Regal's trying to go away with Ketrigan and the king, then yeah, Buckkeep is just kind of left. So Fitz stepping up to that and taking control, and then Verity, now that we know he is alive, coming back, and that we can have a more head-on conflict with Regal. This is reassuring. This is kind of going in the right direction. So we did end on a bit of a high, and a high in Hobbland is usually followed by a horrific plummet to the bottom of the depths of pain. So I can't wait to continue. So I am on the last 100 pages, and I've heard this is when it gets interesting. So I thought I would try and capture my reaction to the last 100 pages. Because so far, Fitz is doing not too bad. Like I said in the last clip, he's got a plan to get Shrewd and Ketrigan out of the Buckkeep, and he also made a deal with Brondy about taking over Buckkeep. Things are looking good. Which is always a concern when you're reading Hobb. When things are looking too good, they probably are. Okay, let's try this. And Regal is now king in waiting. Oh, I hate him so much. But I do really like that Shade put all these Pocked Man things going around the whole ceremony, with the candle flames going blue and the milk curdling and the bread not rising. I really like that. I thought that was good. I also like that King Shrewd wasn't the one that put the crown on Regal's head. He ended up putting it up on his own head, which I just think is very good imagery about the whole situation. I was away for 2 minutes Come on, this is big enough for the two of us. Okay. I knew things were going to go poorly for Fitz because it's a Hobb book, but it's incredible how quickly she can give him everything and then take it away. So a mini recap of the ending, just in case you've been watching this as a recap. Fitz and Shade had a plan to get King Shrewd and Kettricken out of Buckkeep and safely away. However, on the night when it was all supposed to happen, we got Regal's ceremony and he's now the king. Oh, I hate Regal so much. This book, I hate him in the first book, but this book in particular, he's a very difficult character to even get in the head of and understand just from a human perspective. I can understand his motivations. I can see why the way he is the way he is. We've had plenty of backstory about his mother and sort of this splitting between the inland duchies and the coastal duchies, and how he's kind of leaning more towards the inland duchies, and then he feels like his mom was killed and things like that. So I can see why he is the way he is. But every single thing he does, I'm like, he just can't be human. There's just... oh, he's so frustrating as a character. I mean, right at the end, when he's taking the drugs away from Shrewd that are keeping him, that are mollifying his pain. Who, in the right mind, it's still his father. So on the night he became king, they planned to take the king and Kettricken away. However, when they went up to King Shrewd, he'd just given up. He was a very old man, and I kind of thought he was on his way out in this book, just because he just degraded over the story, which is so sad to read, in the fact that he didn't really have many people behind him, King Shrewd. Even the fool was saying to Fitz, why are you not checking in on your king as often? It was a really sad story from King Shrewd's perspective. So he just wanted to die in Buckkeep. So as his last request, he kind of came to terms with the fact that Regal is a terrible person, and he wanted to reach out to Verity and just kind of say goodbye. However, in classic Hobb fashion, they reached out and he didn't even get to speak to Verity before he died. That was so sad. I was waiting. I just wanted a nice moment, because it was going to happen, but I just wanted a nice moment between Shrewd and Verity, but we didn't even get that. However, in this sort of skilling sea that it is visualized as, we found out that Justin and Serene were sapping away the king's strength and killing him because of Regal. I hate them so much. So King Shrewd died. Fitz was very unhappy and kind of destroyed from using the skill with the king, but he was given this very potent drug and kind of went on a bit of a killing spree, which was interesting. And he went out and he killed Serene, and then he hunted down Justin and killed him as well, but that caused complete chaos in Buckkeep, and he was thrown in prison and blamed for killing the king. Now this is when it got really sad. He was thrown into prison and tortured by Regal to try and make him admit that he killed King Shrewd with the wit. It was great to see the coastal duchess stand up for him and say, we don't believe you, he was very loyal to his king. But even Fitz knew straight away that Regal was not having any of it. The fact that he was under his care in that prison, there was no chance he was going to survive. And I think there was some really good imagery there with him sort of in this very stark, empty cell, fading away, getting tortured and beaten, but then Brondy gives him his cloak just as that one little bit of comfort and one little bit of warmth. However, in the end, it wasn't going to do that much. It's not going to protect him. Top tier imagery. I love Hobb with her small little details like that. And when Burek came to see him in the cell and spat in his face and just threw insults at him, I knew immediately that Burek was covering up what he was saying. There was no way he was going to do that. This is Burek we're talking about. So I must say, I was looking for coded messages in his words. And even at the end of the book, we don't really know what happened to Ketrigan and the Fool. However, if you read what Burek said to Fitz in his hate-filled rage, he did hint at the Fool having horses. He said something about only fools and blah, 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 something about horses. And I read it and I was like, this feels like a coded message. I'm convinced that was Burek trying to tell him that they got away on horseback. Probably with Sooty and Ruddy, seeing as we knew that they, or Rudy, we knew that they survived. However, despite the fact that I knew it was not really Burek, his words about just saying lay down and die fits. That was so hard to read. That was brutal because I was like, I know there's more meaning to this, but just the phrasing and how Fitz was in that cell after being beaten, that was tough. So he did lie down and die and escape into Night Eye's mind. Now this was so cool. It was really emotional at the time, but standing back now and now that I finished it, I'm like, that's actually really, really cool. At the time, it was heartbreaking because it was him just sort of letting go of everything and melding minds with Night Eyes. And part of me wanted him to just stay with Night Eyes forever because he deserves a break. With all Fitz has been through in Royal Assassin and Assassin's Apprentice and just sort of this very simple life of hunting and sleeping, part of me was like, just stay there, Fitz. You deserve sort of a retirement into this sort of wolf life. But in the end, he was brought back. And even that chapter, right at the end, there was a line from Burek. And every time I closed my eyes, Burek would seize me and shake me like a rag. Stay with me, Fitz, he kept saying. Stay with me, stay with me. Come on, boy, you're not dead, you're not dead. Then suddenly he hugged me to him, his bearded face bristling against mine, and his hot tears falling on my face. He rocked me back and forth, sitting in the snow at the edge of my grave. You're not dead, son. You're not dead. Oh, it feels... that last paragraph there, oh man, that was tough to read. Even just using the word son, I know we probably meant it as more of a familial, not necessarily a direct familial bond, but Burek really has become Fitz's dad and taken chivalry's place. And just hearing him say that and just the way that he reacted to bringing him back and putting him back in his own body. Oh, the feels. That was it. It finished with him going back into his own body, which was an emotional ending. I will say, I expected there to be more traumatic, horrifying scenes, especially with Assassin's Apprentice ending with Nosy. I'm going to sort of have a hot take here and say the end of Assassin's Apprentice was probably more heartbreaking than the end of Royal Assassin. I will say the ending was amazing. It was still very emotional and incredible, but Nosy. I will never get over Nosy from Assassin's Apprentice. That was brutal. Absolutely brutal. But I love the ending to this. I love this book overall. It's definitely a slow-paced book, but there's always so much going on. And we just kind of finished, and I'm like, I need more. So the fact that this is that long and it's a pretty slow-paced story, but I finish it and I want more, that's a pretty good sign. And I do have a theory about Molly. Molly is definitely pregnant. There's no other way that she would cut Fitz off like that in the way she did and say that there is someone else. She's not going to be falling in love with someone else. I do not believe that for a second. This someone else is definitely a baby. And also we saw a lot of foreshadowing of this during the story as well. Fitz did say to Cook that there was someone else pregnant, and he said it just to try and get her off his back, but that's definitely foreshadowing for Molly being pregnant, and I'm convinced that's why she left. There's no other reason she would leave. And now that I'm thinking about it, the last time we saw her, she looked like she was going to say something and she didn't. She's pregnant, 100%. That's my theory for Assassin's Quest. Molly's pregnant. We'll probably find her and she will have a child, is my guess. So I'm looking forward to Assassin's Quest. I realize I didn't say much about the Trauma Club merge because I didn't want the video to be about that. I wanted it to be about Royal Assassin. But for those interested, I made this jumper and t-shirt and long-sleeved hoodie pretty much for this video because I thought it'd be funny. However, this is on sale for the whole month of June. It's on sale now up until June 30th. So if you do want an embroidered hoodie or one of the t-shirts or a mug or the long sleeve t-shirt, the link to that will be in the description below. When I finished Assassin's Apprentice, you all warned me how horrific Royal Assassin was going to be. Do I need to be concerned for book 3? Most people say Royal Assassin is the most traumatic, so do I need to be concerned? I know it's a Robin Hobb book, so it's still going to be horrific in some way, but how concerned should I be? Thank you very much for watching. Ahhhh.